Hello. We are back. I'm getting some music going. Oh, did I turn it down too much? Oh, that seems like that's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Pretty good little background music there.
There we go. Let's see. Yes. 573. My wife's asking me a question. So I had to get her an answer there real quick.
That's what you want to do.
Indeed. So we got a number of things that we want to cover today. I'm going to list them out now. And actually, you know what? While I'm thinking about it, I just, pro tip. One of the things that I found that's kind of interesting about the way my brain works, I really I love these writing tablets. I get them from Dollar General. They are $1. But I like them for sake of when I need, when I'm on a call like this. Oh, there we go. When I'm on a call like this, I like to take notes, and it helps to occupy my hands and my brain. But what's interesting is I basically throw the notes away afterward, right? I don't need the notes for anything other than during the call. It's like a live tool, a live reference. Sometimes I'll note something down and then reference back to it, and it's useful that I had it written down. But most of the time, my AI notes are going to be better for anything I do after the fact. So,
Right.
So I don't need them for anything other than that. But anyway, so I'm getting that ready. So okay, so we got a few things. I'm going to show you something in Mac Whisper for how I'm doing a little bit better transcription through that. I'm going to show you that. You have a project where we want to work on building you out an AI developer. So we're planning to talk about that. This past month we've been working. What's that?
That sounds pretty cool.
Indeed. This past month I've been working on my mid-ticket offer delivery. I've got a little bit of wrap up around that, so I want to see if we can trigger that and get that done. And then the other thing that's on my note, and we may not cover all of this, but the other thing that's on my note is that you and I had a fantastic discussion on Saturday about a change in direction about what I'm doing. So there's a lot that we could cover. Let's go ahead and dive into it and try. Go ahead.
On that note, I took a lot that I know about this new direction about SaaS companies. Right. And I did a deep dive with Grok for you. So remind me, I'll share that whole thread with you. I was on my phone, and so I couldn't share it, but
yeah,
got that for you.
Yeah, perfect. Well, here, let me share my screen. I do like the background music.
It's a big difference. Small thing, big difference. Boom, roast.
All right, I'm sharing my screen. Let me get this out of the way. Let me pull Mac Whisper up here. Okay, now that I'm thinking about it, hopefully the key is hidden. Actually, let me just validate that real quick and make sure that what I'm about to show you doesn't reveal my API key. I just want to be a little bit cautious there. And then I'll show you. I'm pretty sure it won't reveal the API key. Yeah, no, okay, it doesn't. Good.
Good.
All right, let me pull the screen back up. Let's do this one. Here we go. Okay, so in Mac Whisper, if you go to settings, which is what I have here, and then you go down to cloud transcription, this Deepgram is really good. So it's also a great tool to be able to integrate with APIs and whatnot. If you want, so if you have something that gets you a recording but doesn't get you a transcript, and you want it to get you the transcript, so say recording in Squadcast, and you want it to trigger manually or automatically getting transcription, Deepgram's one of the best for that. It's really nice. It's fantastic at doing it, and it's cheap. So hour-long recording is pennies or fractions of a penny. So it's really scalable for doing a lot of it. And you get $200 of API credits just for signing up. So it's worthwhile even off of that. I mean, even once you start paying, it's not bad. But the key reason why it's potentially worthwhile. So when when you select it as your model up here, so when you get that API key, you can have it as a model. When you get it, let me see. Will this one show it for me? Let's look. Yeah, it will. Okay, so when you get it, you get much better speaker detection. And so
that's huge.
When I first threw this in on the Whisper model, it only detected one speaker. And then when I reran this through the Deepgram, it accurately was able to denote between the two of us. And then what it does is that for the speaker, oh hey, look, I could change what color we are. There we go. You get to be purple. I'm gonna be blue. But it said speaker 1 and speaker 2, and I was able to assign the name. So it didn't know the names already. I assigned the names, but you were like, I was able to click on this, and then it would play a sample and be like, oh, okay, well, that's Charlie, and then play mine. And it was like, oh, okay, that's me, right? Anyway, but yeah, so that is huge for sake of being able to that extra context. You know, like when I throw this in, I could say, hey, really lean on what Zach said, or really lean in on what Charlie said, and like, what did Charlie say about this? And it has the information to be able to give you that information, you know, give you that context back. So anyway, but yeah, Deepgram pro tip, try it out, plug into it. It's good stuff. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. So do you have to run it once as Mac Whisper and then once as Deepgram, or you just run the transcription as Deepgram and you're good?
So when you're first pulling it in, let me share my screen again. When you first pull in the recording, just make sure up here you have the model selected that you're wanting to use. Nice. and then you could it'll just run through as Deepgram, and it'll do the transcription and the speaker detection. I did find I feel like it takes longer to go through the API than it does to do it locally, because it has to like send out and upload the file, and then you get back the transcription. So you know, there are some downsides to it, but overall, I mean, it's really cost effective. You get a better transcription and you get the speaker detection. So that's really nice, really powerful. And you mentioned you do have the pro version of Mac Whisper. Anybody watching this, I don't know if that feature is included in the free version. I think it might not be. So if you're watching this and you want that feature, you probably need the pro version of Mac Whisper to do it. So it's like it was like a $50-$60 upgrade, maybe even less than that. I forget what it was, to be able to, and it was a one-time purchase, not a recurring. So anyway, really worth it.
Yeah, I use Mac Whisper all the time now with what we're doing. I mean, what makes so much sense.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we got 3 things that we can cover. I think my thing on the mid-ticket delivery is actually pretty simple. So if we can, I'd like to cover that real quick. Part of it is one of the things that I do. Let me show people. So my assistant Meryl, who's on this call with us, we pull in the recordings into Descript. Descript then lets us break this out a little bit easier. So she went through and she got all of the different sections broken out for us, so that I could throw this into a core structure. So part of what I want to do. So
did she manually do that?
Correct. So she'll go through and then based on what's going on in the transcription and whatnot, she'll go through and then manually chop it to the right spot, make sure that we have it done well. If I did this more systematically, where I very clearly and specifically said like, hey, here's going to be my code word for like how we, like when I'm breaking into another section that we want to chop up, then like there might be some ways that I could do it more automatically. But really, Descript as a tool by itself makes this really easy, because you could search for the right words. You could search for search for like when I start talking about the next thing, and then zero in just on the transcript portion to figure out where to slice it, and then get the composition that's necessary to break it out.
Nice.
But yeah, what's cool is Descript did integrate with Zoom, so I recorded this at Zoom, so I'm pretty sure Muriel was able to pull it in a little bit easier. I actually didn't run that process with her, so but yeah. So the next step on this though, so Muriel, hopefully you could hear me and you're listening. If you can, say yes, Zach, I hear you, I'm listening. And then Charlie, I'm gonna be on this screen, so if she does say that in the chat, let me know.
Okay.
But Muriel, go ahead and move forward with this, and get it set up. But the other thing that I need to do is I need to let's go into Claude real quick. I'm sharing my screen, right?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So I need to go into this email sequence, and I want to say, can you give me the first email again, but make it be coming from my assistant Muriel, and I want to cover a couple of things. So let's sign in. Webinars, previous. Do I have this one set up as a cloud? Register to watch it on demand. I do. Yep. Okay. So your first email again, make it be coming from my assistant Muriel. For post event delivery, I want to cover two things. One, they can watch the whole thing immediately here. Give a spot to include links to resources and slides. And 3, cover that we're in the process of setting up the course on ampintelproject.com, and we'll be delivering access to that shortly as well. Okay, so I want to get an email ready for Muriel to be able to send out to the people. She knows how to track them down and how to send it out to people. That way this step's at least completed. Did Muriel respond? Is she in the chat saying that she's listening?
I have not seen her private chat response yet. No.
Muriel, are you there? Okay, let's see. Make sure you have. Yeah, I want to just focus on the delivery of the immediate stuff. Don't talk about future tips, because I'm not sure what I'm going to do on that right now, so I don't want to make promises that I may not deliver on. I want to make sure that you have media next shop.
You're not sharing your screen now. You know that?
Oh, I'm not. No, I did not know that, and I was intending to. Present. There we go. Sometimes it cuts out without me wanting it to, and I don't know why that happens. Whoa,
probably personal.
whoa. I'm like full screen and I don't want to be. Exit full screen. There we go. I'm not sure where
Pretty
or
trippy.
how that happened. Yeah, it was trippy. Okay, so I got this email. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to throw it into HackMD and share it out to Meryl so that she can deliver on that for me. Yeah, Meryl might be having internet issues or something. I'm sending her WhatsApp messages, and they're not being marked as
Red.
Yeah, or delivered or whatever. And like typically, that's pretty much an immediate thing. The only time that doesn't happen is if internet issues or if she stepped away to go to the bathroom or something.
Yeah.
But all right, now I'm seeing that it just went blue. Meryl, do you hear me? If you hear me, go ahead and say something in the private chat.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, cool. You must have stepped away for a second. We were talking to you for a second. I just sent through the link to this. This includes the
Be right back.
Meryl, what I need you to do is get this email sent out. CC me on it, send it out to the people who purchased the effortless content system. This gets them access to everything. Go in and update it so that we have the links to the resources that I included in the presentation. I'm pretty sure I shared that with you. If I didn't, let me know, and I'll get it shared. Actually, here, I'll just go in and find it real quick. Let me see. Effortless content system slides. Was it this one? Yeah. All right. Perfect. Here, we copy that. This is the link to what we would share out. So go ahead and get that delivered out to people. Double check and see if the other email needs to be modified at all. But send it out to everybody who purchased. And then yeah, so send that out to everybody who purchased, that we make sure that they have access to the replay. And then moving forward, let's make sure that that's part of our strategy, that after those workshops, as soon as the cloud recording is live, we get them immediate access if they missed it, but then we let them know that we're getting the course set up as well. So hopefully that makes sense. But that should be our go forward plan. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. So feel free to modify that email, get it sent out, CC me on it. Let me know if you have any questions. But it should make sense. It's kind of like our first step is we're going to get people as quick access to view the replay as possible. We're also going to let them know that like we will be chopping it up and making it into an easier to flow through course, and they'll get access to that too. So that's kind of the plan there. So look at that email. You'll see that context is in there. And then I gave you what you need to be able to make those updates. So yeah, and then let me know if you have any questions. But that's what I need you to do to move that forward, and then that should be good. Charlie, you are currently off and not there. You let me know when you're back. But the other thing that we want to be working on is we want to be working on well, so I got two things. So Charlie and I talked on Saturday, and I had, we got some really good insights about kind of where I could be focusing, what I could be working on, what my core offer could look like. And it's been a bit of a journey to like think through that and think what it looks like, where I'm focusing. I've got a lot of options in front of me, and so it's been a process to try and choose and decide on that. And what we ended up coming up with was some pretty cool stuff around focusing on helping SaaS companies implement like my webinar system. And actually here, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my pull up my screen again. Present, screen share screen. All right, let's go into Claude. Let's do Zach Hammer, personal brand. Charlie, you back?
I'm back.
Perfect. I was just flowing into something since you weren't on. But yeah, we could go into whatever you want to. What I was gonna do is I was gonna throw, not that. Oh, I'm gonna make it crash by trying to paste too much into the thing there. There we go. All right, let's do this. There we go. A succinct description of the offer that Charlie and I discussed for me to refocus.
Oh, here. Let me send you my grok.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good.
So we've got this new bakery down the street from us.
Uh-huh.
It's like, he's like a sourdough chef.
Right.
We're spending so much money on homemade bread now. It's so good.
Right. My wife actually bakes sourdough decently as well, or decently. She does a great job. Frequently was the word that I was meaning. But yeah, it's actually it's kind of interesting. Our sourdough starter, it's wild caught yeast, which so there's a process of how you can create the environment to catch yeast, and that's what your starter is. So our starter at this point is from all over the US. It's what's that? Yeah, so our starter started in Oregon. So it's part Oregon yeast, part Washington yeast, part Idaho yeast, part I don't know. Yeah, Wyoming. Yeah, Nebraska, Iowa, bit in Texas too. Did we do any down in Texas? Yes. Texas, Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure we had it going then. Anyway, what starter is currently still alive, Heidi? Oh, so our current starter is named Fro Dough Baggins. Dough spelled D-O-U-G-H. And Vincent Van Dough is our other starter as well. So they get split off and exist as separate entities. Clint Eastwood died. But yeah, anyway, so my wife makes sourdough. We love sourdough. It's delicious. But yeah, anyway, agreed. Okay, cool. So you were gonna send me the grok thing. Are you getting that ready? What are you doing to send that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna load it up, send it to you the WhatsApp.
Dancing to the
My
music
computer is going very slow. Very
slow. So this weekend I've been 3D printing a new tray to house the papers, because while I do just typically throw away my notes, there's occasionally times where there's something that I've captured that I don't want to throw away quite yet, and so I set it over there to think about it later. So I have times where I need to batch through the notes that I've taken and decide if I need to grab anything off of them or if I just need to throw them away. But anyway, so I got a mini paper tray to catch my notes and stuff, and I 3D printed it, and I have my base plate and then the thing on top, and then I had to split the print in two, and so my other half is over there. Anyway, yeah, fun stuff. All right, let's see. Grok share. Let me pull that up. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Does garage
So
give
what
me
I
an ability
did,
to... Go ahead.
so what I did was I asked them, like, there's some coaches I know that serve this niche, such as Dan
Right.
Martell. You've got
Right.
Tiny Sass. Um,
Right.
no, and so I was like, hey, find other people like that. So I've never heard of like Natalie or Matt.
Right.
Um, a lot of these people I haven't heard of.
Right.
And then I look through like what is their pains, what is their words. They've got CAC, customer acquisition cost. And so looking through this,
CAC sounds so dirty.
I know. um, and
Boom roasted.
boom, roasted. And so a lot of it was kind of people wanting to get to seven figures, or
Right.
or mid seven figures. I
Right.
kept just kind of getting deeper analysis. Like they've got a little bit of a team, 1 to 10
Right.
employees. Their big thing is how do we get more customers? How do we retain customers? How do we stop losing customers? Like that's their biggest thing. I think your best group is they're not really worried about dying. That like they're not survival mode. Like
Right.
they want to grow because they want to grow. And I asked them like what keeps them up at night, and they said the fear of unsustainable growth. I was like, no, I don't think that's right. And so I finally got it to where it was pretty good. And then I actually put in like the idea of like, hey, create a one sheet for what you do. And
Right.
So it was just kind of a rough draft. I wanted to like take all the information that I've got and try to help you figure that out.
Yeah. That makes sense. This is something that I recently discovered. This is something that I recently discovered for myself that I've done. Like, it's a really glaring issue that I need to solve to really get my business to the next level, which is I don't do a good job of assessing where somebody is now, documenting that, capturing that, taking them on the journey, and then seeing where they end up. Right? Like I don't do a good job of, I don't currently do a good job with that. And where that's holding me back is that I don't have clarity of how to speak to these issues for people and speak to the journey that I take them on. It's sort of like where I've been operating is like, I'm just excited that people want to work with me. So I just keep working with them. Right.
Right.
And so like where that's been like, it was, Gulliver Giles, I think is how he pronounces his last name. I started working with him, started coaching with him, meaning hired him as a coach, to be clear.
Right.
And that was one of the key insights that I had real quick was like this is the reason why I am not confident in what I should be charging, why it's worth it, like any of those things where it's like, I've known the value is there, but being able to clearly say, yeah, I know, like, I feel like I reliably can make you this much money and help you achieve these goals. And yeah, it's definitely worth this amount, right? There's a path for me to quantify that. And so like learning that, part of what I've learned in this process is I haven't been doing a good job of that initial assessment to figure out, what are your pains? What are the things that you're struggling with? Those sorts of things. And like clearly capturing and documenting that. Anyway, what's my point in all of that? My point in all of that is like, it's super helpful for you to go through just knowing what you know, because of all the things that I've missed doing that. Because I've worked with people in these scenarios, right? Like I've successfully worked with people where I've gotten them some great results, but I never thought to step back and ask, like, what are the key pains that you're dealing with? What are your goals, and where are you struggling and getting them? What are the things that keep you up at night? Like I haven't asked people those questions. And you wouldn't necessarily ask them exactly in those ways, but I haven't done that before. And so yeah, it's very helpful to go through, and you have some perspective on this already. And then also for me moving forward, I'm now realizing that needs to be part of my collection process, that I'm collecting I'm collecting my before state and my after state, right?
Can you want me to share with you how I've done that really well, I think?
Absolutely I do. There, I'm going to turn off my screen share and let's just focus on that. What have you done for that?
So there's a couple simple ways to do it. Probably my favorite kind of cheesy coaching question, but it really works well, is, hey, if I was going to wave a magic wand and tomorrow morning you wake up and everything's exactly the way you'd like it to be in your business and your personal life,
right?
What would it look like? Or what would it be? What would it look like? What would it sound like? What would it smell like? What would you feel?
Right.
And one little key ninja tip is they'll often start saying what they don't want. And I'll be like, okay, and so what do you want?
Right.
And so I love that one. And I get them to just, explain it in detail. And then I just say, what's keeping you from doing it now? And so here's the little ninja trick. They'll usually tell you subconsciously within the first 30 seconds.
Right.
And then they'll go on to a story.
Right.
They'll say something like, I don't know how to move forward. And then they'll just start talking about all this stuff. It's pretty amazing. So that's my favorite way. And then I kind of go into the Dan Sullivan, what's keeping you from doing it? What all have you tried in the past? What strengths do you currently have that we can build on? Yeah, that's I just that little bit works really, really well.
That makes sense. I've also, Telly, you said in that one, you said if I waved a magic wand and it was this way tomorrow. I've also heard you do the 3 years now, I think. Do you mentally equate them as the same thing, or do you use them differently strategically?
So I've been working a lot with Jamie Smart.
Yeah.
And he uses the magic wand. And I like how it really brings me to what do I want right now?
Right.
But yeah, I'll often too, if we're going on a journey. This morning I was doing an initial consultation. So if I'm with a client, I may say, at the end of this, what will have had to happen for you to be happy with the progress? Which is the Dan Sullivan question. 3 years from now, what has to have happened for you to be happy with your business and personal progress? But a lot of times, when I'm doing, so I guess I do use those interchangeable, just kind of feels, what am I feeling like?
That makes sense. Yeah. So I get what I hear you saying. There might be a specific way to sequence it out, where each of them helps you accomplish a similar but slightly different thing. So what I heard you say that I like about the if I waved a magic wand and it was this way tomorrow, what that tells you is that tells you this is what they feel like what do they want right now? What do they really want? What do they want to achieve quickly? Right? What I like about the 3 years, there's a sales reason for that, which is if you listen for what their 3-year goal is, very often people's 3-year goals could be achieved within a year or a month, if they focus on the right things, right? And so you create a sales outcome opportunity where you could say, all right, so this is where you want to get in 3 years. Awesome. These, well, let's think through this. Well, what if you did this? What if it looked like this? What would the numbers look like? What would that do? What would that be? And you could typically, you could get people through to a process where you're kind of both getting them, like you're hearing what they want immediately, but you're also able to get to where they think they want it, like what their longer term vision is. And you can potentially show them how they could get there drastically quicker than they wanted. And if you show them that, the chances that they want to buy from you are a lot higher. Does that make sense? Where they're like, oh yeah, I was thinking this was going to take me years, but man, you're right. Like I could potentially reach that goal quicker. Wow. That sounds exciting. Right.
Right.
But yeah, I can't tell you that I've actually done it this way, but just from what I'm hearing from you, and then also some of the sales coaching on why specifically the 3-year question, I think there can be different uses for both of them. And if you sequence it out right, you might be able to learn both angles. So one of them is like the just how can I help you, and the other one is getting their feeling for what the time frame of what matters to them is, and being able to condense the time frame could be a really good sales tactic. But yeah, I love that. So the other thing, can I share like my other insight for what specifically I need to ask for in order to get the information I really need?
Mm-hmm.
So I need to ask for things like, what is your current MRR, right? How many people do you have on your team currently? How do you feel about your sales team? Does your sales team, do you feel like they're skilled? Do you feel like, how do you quantify that, right? How many leads are you generating right now? What percent, how big's your list, right? Like how big's your list of people, right? Like I need to get that information, and I need to document it, because those are all the things that also influence in the future when I start talking to somebody and I hear them, and then like other questions for me that I know, it's like, hey, how many people or how many companies right now, like if you could list off people that right now you feel like I have a decent relationship with a non-competing business that serves my same market, how many people or how many companies could you list right now, right? And if I get them thinking about that, that's also a thing for me. If I have somebody in their mind, they're thinking, man, I don't know anybody. Well, that lets me know I'm not going to lean in on my JV strategy, right? Like I'm not going to lean in on that, because it's not going to feel easy. It's going to feel new, and it's going to feel hard. And like I might be able to bring them there over time through coaching, but like they won't immediately see that as like a quick win, right?
Right.
But it also lets me know like what percent, like it starts to really build my awareness of this group. And by asking those questions and getting really clear on like initial consulting calls, I could categorize it from then, and then do like I need to figure out like where and how I do it, but now that we've been working together, what do these numbers look like? Have we grown your MRR? Have we done that? Where are you now? Where, you started here. I have it documented. Where are you now? Right.
Right.
And the other thing that helps me with is it lets me know, am I actually doing what I want to be doing? Am I making a meaningful impact in the ways that they wanted an impact? Right. Because if I'm not, there's something wrong with either what I'm selling, how I'm selling it, or what I'm actually achieving for people, and I need to adjust that, right? Anyway, so that's been one of my big insights, and like actually just really asking some of those clear, specific numbers so that I have them, and I have them cataloged, and I can reference them later. Anyway, does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Like one of my big insights was, people say, how do we track this? And again, Jamie is like, it's really simple. How many referrals did you get and past clients did you get the last 12 months? And let's track it going forward. And so part of my onboarding form now asks, how many referrals did you get the last 12 months?
Right. Do you have in your sequence a time where you know to follow up and see how it's going now?
So we've got a couple systems in process. One, we invite people to our Tuesday calls for realtors, Thursday calls for lenders.
Right.
So the ones that show up, I've got a pretty good feedback from. And then we also have a quarterly call, where a little 15-minute quarterly call where I say, hey, how are things going?
That makes sense. You say so, and when you say how are things going, you ask those questions again. You say, these are the metrics that we're judging. How are those metrics going? Right. This is where we started. This is where we are.
And I go over what we've done. We go over, the reach, the impressions, ask questions, and then ask them, hey, how's business going for you? And so that's worked well, probably especially for the first year, with folks. It really helps reduce churn. People stay longer, when I do that. So that's what I'm doing.
And are do you in your system, do you have clear specific calls that you're looking to, or clear specific questions rather that you're looking to accomplish on those calls, to say, I know that I want to get the answer for them to actively look at how many referrals they've gotten in the past 12 months, and to see that number is going up, or that it's on pace to go up. Is that systemized to the point where that on that call you want to accomplish that?
It's not. That's a good point. That's a good point to actually say, all right, let's look. How many referrals have you gotten?
And that's part of what I'm figuring out personally is I'm looking at this to say, I know that I need this information. When do I get it? And trying to make some of these things part of my system. But yeah. So for you, I mean, we've talked about this in the past. I think there's two things that are worth potentially tracking, so that you build your long-term feel for people, and it's a lead and lag measure. So for you, we've talked about this past. It's the inbound conversations, right? How many people are reaching out, whether or not it's a deal or not, because that is the early signal that something's working. And then but then long term, I would just transition into just looking at the referrals, because it's after somebody's mentally validated, the system's working toward the beginning, that potentially gets them over maybe that first off ramp that they might take, where they feel like it's not working. It's oh man, I see, you're getting this many inbound conversations, man. Is that I don't know. They weren't tracking it beforehand, were they?
Right.
Not typically.
No. And so I actually haven't been able to get them to track their inbound conversations. It's more that's worked. Honestly, that's just worked more as if someone says it's not working, I can say, well, have you tracked that? And they're like, no. Well, I know it's working for me and my other happy clients. So and then I'm like, well, what's happening business-wise? Who are you working with? They're like, oh, we just closed 2 from our sphere. Well, that's pretty good.
That makes sense.
And so that's what I use it more. So that's why I like the idea of specifically referrals and past clients. That.
Right.
That's easier to track.
Yeah. So and so the way that you could potentially leverage it, because you're right, it's not going to be tracked. It's not the inbound conversations aren't going to be tracked. So you potentially leverage it as hey, here are the signs. Here are the things that you could be noticing that let you know that this is working. When you notice that you had somebody reach out that you haven't talked to in a while, when you get a DM, when you get a call, when you get a text message, when you get somebody reaching out to you out of the blue, again, regardless of whether it's about real estate, that should be your signal that this is working. And again, it's more of an early on signal. it doesn't matter to people after they've been doing it for a while, right? And so ultimately it does always come back to the referrals. So it makes sense. You know, like potentially where I would be leveraging that, I would say maybe the way that you sequence it out is like that's part of your onboarding, right? You say, here's some of the early ways that this is going to start working and where you're going to start seeing it, right? So when you see this, when this happens, you should be thinking, this system is working. It's getting people noticing me. That should be your signal, right? And you don't ask them to track it. You just say, kind of notice this. And then maybe, like, I don't know, for you, when do you think people would typically have like really start noticing the referrals happening? Like how long does that typically take for somebody that this is working well for?
I mean, so I'm gonna answer that, like, how do clients know that it's valuable? I'm actually gonna answer that full answer, because it's taken me a long time to figure out how do I give them immediate relief.
Right.
And part of it is the right client. So the best client is someone that's already pre-sold that sphere of influence and referrals is the way, you know. Then immediate relief is I tell them, like, look, you can relax. You can stop searching for shiny objects. Like, the system's put together. It's working.
Right.
You know, like, all right, you're gonna start noticing that people that you know are gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing you everywhere.
Right.
Like, that's the first sign that you know it's working. You know, so let me know when it's a family member the first time. Let me know when it's the first time a friend. I haven't said this, but I need to. Maybe. One of the things, often marketers will reach out and say, "Oh, you're doing it all wrong."
You should totally note that. You should totally note that. That, like, when you start seeing marketers calling you out on it, that's actually a great sign that it's working perfectly. Oh, that's really powerful. You should note that down as like a thing to include. But yeah, love that. What else?
And then they're going to get a call from someone they haven't talked to in a really long time. That's probably not in their database. That's when that's usually people's aha moment. Now, before then, they're going to start getting clients. They're going to start getting referrals. You know, the reason we do a 90-day trial is, I mean, you should start having your first clients in 90 days. And then the other hidden thing that they really aren't going to notice until about a year later, they're going to look back on their clients for that year, and they're going to be like, my gosh, the quality of these clients and the experience with these clients was so nice and smooth. It's like the wheels were greased, the compliance of the clients. And that's really looking back like, oh my gosh, like all of these clients are clients I want to work with. And it's because they've been persuaded. You're calmer. You know you're going to keep getting more.
Right.
Like, you can be a better leader when you know you're going to get more referrals tomorrow, whether you know, do any marketing or not, you know. So all that to say that that's the lifestyle of what they'll see. And the biggest thing is just, you're going to get clients. Know that this is helping with that.
Tell me again in the sequence, like when you notice friend, when you notice family, what else did you say in that mix?
So first, you can relax. You don't have to look for the next shiny object.
Right, but in the mix specifically of when you start saying, "Hey, you'll notice these," in that part.
Gotcha.
You said friend, you said family. What
a friend, and then a family member. Then it may be a marketer, and then it will be someone that you haven't talked to in a really long time. And that could happen soon. That could happen months down the road.
Love it. So when for you, when are you finding that, like, you're for the people who start to give some level of resistance or start to be feeling like, I don't know if this is the right fit? When is that happening?
I mean, the biggest thing is in the winter, which, I really do want to work on the auto gym. But I mean, the winter, one of my goals is to get people on annual contracts, and anyone who would renew between November and February, I want to make them an offer so that they renew like May. I really want all my people to renew between like May and November, I think.
Right.
Preferably July and August. Like if I could wave a magic wand, all my people would renew between July and August because that's when they're the busiest. And that's when they're reaping the rewards from the system. The winter's always cold. Like all of my clients, even the believers, they're like, every winter it freaks me out because people it's slower there.
That makes sense. I love that. So yeah, so anybody that you get started, what's your current approximate way that people pay? Are they paying monthly? Are they paying
monthly? Yeah,
monthly. So yeah, for you, that you need a promo offer in May, June, July, August, right? Like you need promo offers in there that are centered around annual, where they mentally move from hey, I'm seeing this, I'm loving this, let me lock in this system so that it's running for me for the next year, and I get some sort of bonus or benefit out of that, so that you've carried them through. They've already made the purchase in winter. Yeah, I love that. When do you do? So winter is when they're typically having that potential issue. Yeah, in terms of your sequence, how often are you doing the?
So here's the other interesting thing. Winter is when I get most face time with them on the mastermind calls because they're slower. In the summer,
right.
I usually spend less time with them because they're busier, and that's okay. Like they may not get me any content for 6 months, and I tell them that's okay. We're going to keep running the system. Like, that's when you need to. Like, you're going to make 80% of your business in like 80% of the year, or in 20% of the year.
Yeah, and you speak to that too. You say like so that your promos in the summer are mostly just around, hey, let's lock this down, let's make this annual, you're getting great results, we do this, we'll capitalize on it, we'll keep running it for you, and then in the winter your promotion and your topic is more around, hey, let's get all your marketing done so that when you're busy this summer, you're not even having to think about it. So come in here's the sessions that we're running to accomplish your content creation that you're going to need. Here's I think that's a really good, that's a really good flow for like how you speak to the problems and knowing the reality of them. I'm
gonna switch my Wi-Fi network. Hold on 1 second.
All right, perfect. No worries.
Hey, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right, perfect. Yep, that's good.
So yeah, so the thing that I could see you doing, when in your process is it coming up that you're asking about the friend, the family member, that sort of thing? When is that happening in the 90-day trial?
I mean, I tell them up front, this is what you should look for. And then they come to the Tuesday calls, and then I meet them like quarterly.
I wonder if what you need is, so are you asking those questions on the recurring Tuesday calls?
Yeah. So I ask them more generic, like, hey, who are you working with? What's going on? have you had any anecdotes? And so they'll usually share that.
And okay, so you are hearing them from that. Perfect.
Yeah.
So that does take care of that. So during that time, you're saying, great. Sounds like the system's working, right? Are you saying that?
Yeah.
Are you saying those kinds of things? Perfect.
Yeah. And that's
so then, go ahead.
That's really a big part of the calls is, everybody's not going to get a referral every week, or I'd charge a whole lot more.
Right.
But every week someone's got business. And so it, keeps everybody like, all right, it's working.
I love it. Yeah. Are you leveraging the content of those calls to follow, like to send out like an email blast to everybody who's active saying, hey, here's my favorite story from this week's calls of how the system's working. This person's brand new. They got started. We're running the system and they've got these conversations that came in, right?
Well, why do you think I want to build brandy?
Love it.
I'm not using that as well as I want.
Yeah, because my thinking is for the people who don't show up, it could be like it's how you capitalize what's going on in that group, but still reach the people that aren't showing up. That you have another way to impact them.
Right.
Anyway, I love that. Okay, cool. That all makes sense. Me personally, I'm glad I went down that. It helps me understand a little bit more what your systems look like, which helps me to sell it better and think through it better. But okay, so AutoGen, let's talk about it. Tell me more. So why specifically AutoGen? What are you looking to accomplish, and why do you see that as potentially being the solution?
Yeah. So my big vision is to help entrepreneurs, spend more time with their family. And so I want entrepreneurs to be able to hone in on their superpowers, and then eventually, I want to be a publisher for them. I really want to publish, and that includes content as well as software. I think I've got a unique viewpoint, and I love the idea of helping publish brandy for you, or my buddy Tony Ray, have some software for him. We talked about it the other day, the idea that we help people discover their unique ability, and then we create software that kind of lets everybody's superpowers connect together. So I've got this vision of, I've got people that I build multiple software for, that is very unique to their genius. So that's the big vision. The current vision is something like 95% of Y Combinator folks use AI for most of their development.
Right.
And we talked about this. AI is if we're not using AI, we're going to get passed by people that are using AI. It's the reason that Paul Graham, that runs Y Combinator, helped found it, is so rich. He built Yahoo stores, and he could develop in one weekend what his competitors was taking 3 weeks to do. And that's how he won. So it's very important to me to utilize AI to be very, very efficient in features and growing, and for me personally. And so with that, I don't think I can afford a really great developer that already has in-depth knowledge of how to use AutoGen or stuff like that. It's so new.
Right.
And so I've created a prompt. I was like, all right, if I could only program 2 hours a day, how can I, I've got to have at least an idea of the scaffold. But I think I could probably, that's what I want to do. I want to figure out I want to figure out the system to use AutoGen, so I can find a developer and say, here's the system I want you to use. Just like I did with my referrals waste ad system. I figured out the system, And now I've got my ad manager say, this is the system I want you to run it.
Right.
So, I need to figure out what it is to be able to do that. So it's survival, it's speed, it's growth, it serves the biggest vision. Um, and the other, like, I'm trying to discover the system to be able to develop out like this.
Makes sense. So, maybe it's more difficult setup. Not sure. Crew AI is more. Possible get something. Build on top of lane chains. Okay, so there's a couple options. There's Crew AI, is another tool that potentially does part of what you're looking for here. I haven't used these a ton myself, but I do hear from people and what they're using and what they like. Matthew Berman seems to lean more toward Crew AI at this point. So Crew AI is very similar as a system for what AutoGen is. The idea is that you define out your different agents and what their roles are, and then you give them the task, right? So it's still that same concept. So that as a thing. There's also Manus, which has recently come out as well. You don't necessarily need Manus itself, but are you familiar with Manus? Have you heard about that?
I've heard of it. Okay.
So the short of it for Manus is mostly like how it's putting together the different tools. And there's also people right now that have put together how do you achieve what Manus is doing, but in an open source way. So there like there's some options for that. I forget what those are called. Let me research some of that real quick. What are some open source alternatives to Manus that people have been building projects around? One of them is called Anus. And it's pronounced that way, but spelled like you would think, or like you might think.
Don't search that on Google Pics.
But yeah, Autobait, Owl is one. Yeah. Here, let me send you some of these messages. So there's a couple of things like that are potentially worth looking at. What specifically has drawn you to AutoGen? So for one thing, are you aware of like Crew AI? Right? Were you already aware of that?
No, I was not. I was just talking with I was talking with Brock and Claude this weekend, thinking through like what this project is. Right. And so originally I was going down the idea of using Cursor with an agent. And then I started like, oh man, like what if I had a couple different agents? And so I was talking, and AI recommended AutoGen.
Okay.
And yeah.
So there's a few things that you can do, and tools worth exploring. AutoGen competitor alternative, Crew AI is one of them. Okay, and it's a pretty popular one. I don't have a hard or fast opinion about either of them. I do know somebody like Matthew Berman has looked at both of them, and he builds a lot of things on Crew AI. So that tells me something, if that makes sense. Other tools that people are finding a lot of value in. So people really like Cursor. There's a lot that Cursor's doing. But have you checked out Bolt? Bolt.in?
Yeah.
.new. Okay. So there's also the ability to self-host Bolt and run it locally using your local AI if you want to, or pulling into your own APIs for that as well. And I forget what let me see. Privacy Stack Biz. I'm trying to find the the self-hosted version of Bolt. AI full stack. Here's a second. I'll see if I can find that for you real quick, because that would allow you to that would allow you to
Bolt.diy.
That I think that's right. Yeah, bolt.diy. So that gives you the the same concepts, but allows you to pull in your own keys, your own stuff, and do it locally, which might be more in the vein of what you'd be looking for. From what I've seen, the Bolt stuff is a little bit more open source than Cursor. Does that make sense? Like, and there's a little bit more of that open source community going on with Bolt than there is with Cursor. And so you might find some of the same things that you like about Cursor while getting the outcomes from something like Bolt. But I from what I've seen, it's still mostly like working with one developer. If that, I think.
And Bolt is not an IDE, right? It's not an I.
It's got some components like that in it. So like you can see the code set that it's building out, that it's working with. I forget if you could download it like as a project to work with like Visual Studio Code or potentially to pull it into something like Cursor even. But you might be able to make direct modifications too. It really depends on what you're looking for. I've only played with it a bit. You remember the rubber duck site that I set up and showed you after we had talked, and I did that for fun. I did that with Bolt.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And so as a tool, that's one that's potentially worth considering as like one of the key players that people like. But yeah, let me find. Let's see. Manus open source alternative. Anus. Manus Owl. Yeah, let's see. And they might have changed the name. Open Manus might have been the old Anus one. But that might be a good option as well. So like what I'm seeing in terms of iterations, let me try and simplify this. So Cursor and Bolt are both very similar in terms of some of what they're trying to be able to help people achieve, where it's like it's aware of your code base and it's using AI to help you pull in help to directly code things for you, even build out project structures, some of that type of stuff, right? So like that's what those are. Crew AI and AutoGen are in the vein of you're defining agents and giving them subtasks to say, hey, you go through and do this, you go through and do this, and then you work on it together to come back with the thing that you're looking for, right? And the better the models that you feed into that, sometimes the better the outcomes that you're able to achieve from them. Okay, that's what those are. Manus is an agentic system with different pieces working together. But one of the key things that it does and it has access to is that rather than just being focused on the coding and those sorts of things, you're also giving it tools to be able to like run browser sessions for you, so that it's not just doing API style pulls from things. It's actually able to interact with the web as it exists. So like it gives it a little bit of an extra edge of both being able to accomplish things on your behalf, but also the segments of the internet that aren't easily API accessible, which is what most of the other tools are relying on, right? And that extra edge seems to be what people are really excited about from like that Manus angle. And you could do a lot of that in open source ways, so you don't rely on that tool specifically. And not that you need to. The biggest thing about Manus is I think people have found its it's hard to get access to it right now, right? And so if you want to be able to do it without having to wait for it, then that's kind of where that comes into play. Does that all make sense?
Yeah. Which, I think AutoGen actually allows using AI or browser tools too through Puppeteer, because it's built by Microsoft, of course, which Puppeteer, but they've got their own version called Playwright, but same thing.
Right.
It can direct that, I think.
So that's part of, that is part of the overall process. I don't know. One of the things that I've seen is that the difference between what something like Manus and using Puppeteer is that it depends on how well integrated. Sometimes I think it might use both aspects, but one of the key layers that happens with these models that are starting to become really smart is that they're actually assessing the image of the browsing session rather than the code. They're assessing the image in order to determine what to do and where to do it and how to do it. And so it's not having to reinterpret it. It's interpreting it through the UI that it was designed for, which is like, this is designed to make sense for a human, but it's being done through this code layer to actually build it out. So the tools that people are really excited about seem to be doing that and doing that well. So it's not having to just look at it from like here's what this row is and here's what this div and the ID is. Like it's not doing it through that way. It's actually assessing the visual, and then it might from that then zero in on figuring out what the row is and that sort of stuff. But like, do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's just able to, they're able to actually understand an interface quicker than tools that aren't operating that way. And so you get better results because of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And AutoGen might be leveraging things like that, or you might be able to build something into AutoGen or like build out a tool or an agent that works that way. But that key element seems to be making a difference where it's not just assessing the code of the page to make its decisions. It's interpreting it visually like a human would. And then from that being able to take actions. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, those are this is entering into an area I haven't done a ton with. Most of this has been me playing in order to figure it out, but I haven't had projects that for me were like I felt like this was realistic, realistic and the best use of my time to dive in to learn it. It's only ever been I felt like this was a fun experiment to try it out and see what happens. And so I've gone deeper than probably most people, but I haven't got as deep as somebody who's used to coding and is looking for the best ways to use these tools to really accelerate what they're doing. I'm coming at it from a newbie saying, how can I give myself some coding skills when I previously had none?
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've noticed, when we ran the N8N NoCoDB stack,
right.
It actually drove my developer crazy because he's like, this could be so much easier because I'm a programmer,
Right.
And so my hope using that stack was it was going to be something that like anyone could really update. But what I figured out was you actually have to be a pretty good development brain to be able to update it anyway.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, well, so we're actually in the process of moving stuff back to like Laravel and queues and using N8N for some things because the webhook workflow works really well.
Right.
And so the plan was still to use that. And so with this, that's what I'm thinking. Like, all right, from a development standpoint, what's the best way to do it? And it looks like it's saying, like, what I'm reading is autogen. It's saying autogen is better at programming. Like with a team, like it's more like you've got 4 or 5 different people and they're talking to each other, and it's unscripted. Whereas crew AI is like they use the writing example. You got a researcher, a writer, and then an editor, and they work. It's more like a real flow. One, then the other, then the other. ABC.
Right.
Whereas autogen is more like more flowy, so to speak.
Right. Well, and I mean, so one of the things that I've seen from people that are building out different agentic flows is that there's really a good, like, figuring out what kind do you need can be really helpful for what to expect. Because if what you want is you want a specific, where it's like, I know that I consistently want this outcome, then using agents isn't always the right way to do it, right? Like not in the typical way, where like it actually makes more sense where you know that it's always flowing linearly. Like for some tasks, that's exactly what you want it to do. Where it's like, this is a tool or this is a service. I don't want my tool or service to be creative. I want it to run the thing that we know works, right? Like and so that's one thing that I've heard, where like it depends on the deployment. But it does make sense that if like what you want is you want something to sort of serve as like, I know where I want to steer the ship, but I need the grunt work to happen. That potentially makes sense. The other thing have you looked at or heard the concept of vibe coding? Have you heard of that yet?
Yeah.
I wonder if that plays into this a little bit too, of like where people are getting the best results with that, where part of what the goal is like, what is the tool that feels the easiest, works the easiest, where all I'm doing is I'm just telling it to run something or telling it to do something, seeing what happens, and then giving it the feedback from there, where it's like you look for the tools that make that process feel the easiest. Because I think realistically, that's ultimately where you want to end up anyway, right? Like from the standpoint
so from where I want to end up, I want to be able to get a really great developer that leads a group of AI agents.
Well, why? Why do you want a group of AI agents? That sounds like you want somebody to use tools. That doesn't sound like what you want. I think what you want is what the outcome is. Why do you believe that's the way to get you the result that you want?
A great developer is worth 10 to 20x more than a regular developer.
Right.
You need really good engineers. Like, I don't think we're close. I don't think we're close to like being able to solve really hard problems in like the ways that I do. Like, I come up with really weird constraints and I solve problems around them. You know, and so like you need a developer, and to be able to come up with unique ideas. And really good development takes a lot of things. Like it takes, someone that creates the design stories, and then someone that creates the design. I'm thinking about Basecamp and 37 Signals. Like someone that runs their development approach. Like they come together, they come up with the stories, they scope it. You got the designer that works with the developer, and now you got the front end developer and the back end developer. So you've got a design, you got front end, you got back end. It also works really well if you can end up having like a junior programmer and a senior programmer for pair programming. I don't know. Have you ever heard of that term?
Pair programming, yeah.
And so to like create really great novel things, it's kind of the Dan Sullivan thing. Like you want a unique team, where everyone's working in their superpowers. And I think with agents, we can actually create those. We can create really great. And I don't I don't have the money to hire a great designer and a great front end and a great back end right now. So I want to be like, all right, how can I have one person lead this? And as we grow, like I always want a small team, but as we do grow, I want people that really know how to leverage these AI agents so that we can have really, really great people that can get really, really great stuff done.
Yeah, I think one of the things that might be helpful in this flow for you is like you're operating on a belief that the way that they get it done is what will make them more effective. It would be great if you had a way to actually validate that and see, is that assumption true? Right? Like I don't specifically disagree, but if you had the KPI, if you had something to be able to say, because like you don't care really whether somebody uses a team of agents or whether they get the same end result in a quicker time as somebody who's doing it in whatever way they do it, right? Like you don't care, but your belief is, if somebody's doing it this way, I think they'll be more effective. I think we're longer term, like we're going to adapt with the future more readily, and I'm able to do that more cost effectively. But those are things that like if you like step back and think about it, you would theoretically be able to quantify. And here's the reason why I'm asking this. There is a lot of theory right now for why an agentic team is good or not. And a lot of the marketing and information is based around the hype cycle of this is what our theory is. And ultimately this to me is part of the skill set right now in the AI world, which is what is the difference between what people are actually achieving versus what the hype and hope is of what it can potentially do someday. And being able to distinguish between those is the skill set right now. Right? Like because the marketing end of all of these AI companies is all around like the 3-year vision, right? And like whatever time frame, but it's all around like, this is why we're creating this way, because it's going to be able to do all these cool things. But I mean, I've seen in practice, like people talk about, for instance, even right now, a great example of this is like ChatGPT's current image generator. Is it drastically better than it was? Yes. Can it do things drastically better than it did? Yes. Does it eliminate the need for a designer? No. But it does make a designer drastically more effective if they know how to use it. And so like you hear people talking about like this eliminates the designer, and that's not the reality. It's okay that that's like the marketing going on, but like the better assessment is like, no, you still need the designer, but now that designer is drastically more effective than they were. They're able to accomplish, like they're able to iterate, come up with more ideas, but like you still right now need that designer for that final polish of the end product, right? Or at least somebody with a design mindset, right? And having that realistic understanding lets you know what kind of team you need to put together. Does that make sense? And so, so in the vein of these different tools, there's like the promise of what they say. It's not always end result achievable. And the only way to discover that is to try, right? So I don't think it changes much, except that where you would be on this is that you, if you can, what I think would help you is to really define the end result of how do you know that it worked the way that you want to, like how do you know that you got the end result, and then run the experiment to see, oh, okay, these are the pieces that are missing. This is the thing that this is the thing that I still need the human for. Now I know better who I need to go after, or what that developer looks like, or whatever. I don't. Does that make sense?
Yes. And this is the part that sometimes frustrates me about our conversations. Like, that's like, yeah, it would be great to know the end result.
Right.
And like, none of this can be known until we figure it out. And that's kind of part of my superpower is like, I'm good at kind of have a beagle nose, like I can sniff out an idea and start just following it. And like autogen may be wrong, but it kind of goes back to my coldie. Like my coldie is if I start with researching, I never go forward. But if I just jump in and start figuring it out, then I research and figure it out.
Right.
And so like the autogen thing might go like way sideways because like the way I started this, my plan was just to use Cursor to do it. And with Cursor, like I've got a course and I was going through it. And, my friends that I'm in my SaaS with, they're using Cursor agent mode to develop. But I'm going down this idea of AI agents, which me and you basically use AI agents. We've got one thread of this, one thread of this, and like I've got my prompt agent, our referrals way sleep agent. So I mean, we know that works. The question is, I mean, that is a good question. Is it better for it to be autonomous with autogen, or is it better to be more structured with Crew AI? I mean, I think that's the question, right?
Kind of. Regardless, is, you said, is it better to be one or is it better to be the other? How do you know it's better? What is better?
Well, so here's my constraint. I want to be able to have a program that I treat like a programmer, and I spend an hour a day on, maybe 2 hours max, just like I sit down with a programmer. I'm like, all right, here's the program I want, and I let it run.
Right. And
so that I can get a program done in 2 hours a day and make consistent progress.
So for sake of the experiment, the things that you could potentially quantify is you could say, what was the time that it took? It's probably your biggest one, right? Like, like if there's a way that you could quantify you know what? This is probably what I would do. Like, can you define out, can you track the what would be an easy way to do that? So what I'm thinking of is if the goal is deliverables, right? Like if I want to compare apples to apples, then like as a for instance, if I'm going to have one program write a simple calculator app versus my other program, the task that I go after it with is I want it to assess and grade marketing copy and have a machine learning algorithm that improves over time based on the results of the ads.
Yeah.
One of those is obviously drastically simpler than the other, right? And so if your goal is to move forward in your testing, you'd want to be able to weigh to apples your comparisons, right? So it could be like if you note out like when you're coding a program, what level of clarity do you have on what you're looking to accomplish, right? Like, do you have a list of features? Do you have a list of deliverables that you're trying to accomplish, or what does that look like?
I mean, I would say I've got an idea, right? Like that's just part of my. What is your Colby on implementer? Do you know what your Colby on implementer is? Be interesting to see. Mine's idea.
I'm high up.
So,
right.
So
I'm high on
wanted-
FactFinder and Quickstart, and I'm lower on whatever the others were. I don't remember though.
So I mean, you know, like I was like, all right, I want to figure out a way to sync contacts from someone's iCloud, someone's iPhone. Like that was my idea. And so I started working backwards from there. So that's kind of what I have. So, you know, I've got a list of stuff that I want to do now. You know, I want to be able to update the contact sync, update the warm audience creator. My main thing is I want to have a dashboard where the lenders upload the videos and the realtors can log in and see it. So like a content dashboard with data and everything. That's the number one thing right now is the dashboard.
Okay, so what you could potentially do is, so you start with the idea, right? Like that's your working flow. You could start with an idea. Whatever tool you use, it might be worthwhile for you to have like a prompt that you use where you either describe the work that was accomplished, or if depending on how it works, you might literally be able to take a transcript and flow it through something. And then if you could have it have an assessment of like, what were the features that we accomplished, what was the complexity of the features, and then what was the time that it took us to do it, that potentially starts giving you a way to like compare the tools and force yourself to think what got me the result that I was looking for. And the goal or the outcome of that would be you're running on first and foremost the theory of is this possible. But the other opportunity with AI right now is there's lots of different ways that people are doing this. So if over time you can move forward while testing different strategies, you could start to see which one of these actually works best for me. To start with idea, be able to speak to the thing like it's a programmer, and I get the outcome that I'm looking for. And really it would be that ratio of time compared to complexity. And giving that score would allow you to have after the fact. You don't need to know it going into it, right? Because I mean that's the thing. Right. You start with the idea, and as long as you can say, here's what the idea was, here's what we ended up doing, like denote the complexity of this project based on the features, the complexity of the features, etc. And this is what the amount of time that it took. Okay, now I have a metric that I can kind of compare things to, right? Where I could say,
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so the only thing that potentially changes how does that feel to you? Of the work itself doesn't change at all, right? You do exactly what you're used to doing. You start with the idea, you want to work with AutoGen, you started the process with AutoGen, you see what it looks like to get it done with AutoGen. And then you start to be able to now have a metric and an understanding of what it looks like. And then whether you decide to or not, if you decide to try Crew AI, or you decide to see, well, what would it feel like if I used Bolt to do this instead of AutoGen? You like now you have a framework to test it, where it still is all based on the same thing. You show up in the way that you're used to, doing what you're used to, but potentially with different tools to see what the outcome looks like. And then either through collecting a transcript of what your communications look like, and then throwing that through AI to get a debrief assessment, or by talking through, these are the things that we accomplished, this is what I did, and then this was the amount of time that I worked on this.
You're right.
Does that feel doable as like a thing to do so that you get that data of what the KPI was?
Yeah, I think it's basically track a simple way, track the progress in these specific KPIs to see if it's working, right?
Yeah, and then that gives you more of an understanding overall of. I don't know about you, but I find myself in this world, I start it's very easy to get used to doing the thing that I'm used to, or jumping to a new thing because it's novel and not actually seeing, did I get an improvement or was it just interesting? And if you're long-term looking to potentially give this to a team, you might be looking for them to actually have a way to say, like, we see that we can meaningfully improve our process through this, rather than just trusting that's what always works. It's like, we've vetted it, this works, this process works best, we found. I don't know, does that make sense?
This is how it works.
Yeah. And then as you have new tools or ideas to test, you have like a consistent benchmark to compare it against, where you could say, hey, this project has a complexity score of 7 pineapples, and this one had had 5 pineapples, but our time per pineapple was actually lower on this one using this tool. So that gives us a signal that this process probably works better for us, going forward. Anyway, does that make sense?
You're right. Yeah.
And I think the simplified way to look at that would be, you start with idea, you get the features listed out that you accomplished in that session. You could potentially either score the complexity yourself or have AI score it for you and see if that feels reliable. And then from that complexity, you got that complexity score plus the time score, and then now you've got a KPI that says, did we actually meaningfully do something, or did we just try a new tool and have fun with it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. That'll be interesting to see. Yeah, so that's really what I want to test out is, all right, how does an agent framework work? Like, will that work? And my backup is just go to Cursor. Either way, like, I really want to figure out what is the best system that I can say, all right, this is the way I want our development to work. Kind of like I say, this is the way I want our ads to work. Like,
right.
Very unique goals there. And because one of the things that, well, I guess this is part of it too, is what I've found. It's really, I mean, and this makes sense. It's really hard to find someone that's both a really good designer and a really good developer.
Right.
Like, that's hard to find. And I don't want to manage people. So for me, I would have to find a really good designer and a really good developer that are good at being self-directed and working alone together.
Right.
And one of the things that my SaaS Academy, one of the things they mentioned is, development speed is important.
Right.
Like, being able to launch features as needed is important. And so, like, I'm taking all of that. Like, all right, what is? I'm also, like, I'm very, very interested in AI agents. Like, this doesn't feel like work to me.
Right.
My goal is basically to take all of my clients and help them hone in their superpowers and turn them into AI agents that lives on different metaverses, right? So this kind of feeds towards that.
That makes sense. Yeah. And honestly, this may not be clear, but part of that process that we just went through, if that's your goal, what to do, in order for me to meaningfully be able to know if we're doing anything worthwhile, I have to have a framework that I can look at it to say, what does success look like, right? And
gotcha.
What does success look like in a way that I can wrap my head around that can be quantified, right? And so whether or not you do anything different, it lets me be able to look at it and say, well, what would this have looked like if you did it the way that you did before? Right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And how complex was this project compared to the last one? How much time did the last project take compared to this one? Now we can run some math and say, well, yeah, it feels like we we closed the gap. It feels like this is actually helping you. So good, right? Or this was interesting and you still move forward, but actually your own process took you less time, right? So, so maybe AI agents in this scenario for this reason, maybe it's not the right outcome. And maybe we need to rethink why and learn from that in the next iteration. That process of thinking through that gives me a framework to be able to look at what you'd be doing and be able to say, is it accomplishing what you want to, rather than just going down the path and not knowing what what a measurable outcome might look like. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah. That does make sense. Yeah, I wasn't taking it that way. I think if you would ask, all right, like, what have you already researched? What have you already gone down? Because I've spent a lot of time with Cursor. But you did ask, how did I get to AutoGen? And I didn't go into depth there. And then, that idea of you're wanting to know, like, what creates success in the end. And I think success for me, my criteria is, can I have an app that I can run? I can spend 2 hours and it builds a function. It's effective. And the reason is, like, one, that's cool. That's the max I can give to it right now. But the other, if I've got a really great designer developer, I mean, you could probably roll out 2 to 3 features a day then, you know? Because, I mean, you got, which is cool. Or, maybe you can't do that because you spend 2 days trying to come up with a design solution with Vercel v0, or, like, you might have to do some other research, but then once you kind of figure out what you want to do, now you can knock it out in 2 hours or so. You can let them all work together. And that is, at the end of the day, it's like pushing, like, all right, what can we do with these? I want to call them conscious agents because it feels fun. The Donald Hoffman way. And so the 2 hours is really important for me. The other thing is memory. Memory is really important. I'm glad you asked that. Like, it needs to be really, really great at documentation. One of the hardest things about great development is documentation. In fact, like, one of my thoughts that I had this weekend, little rabbit trail, but man, I'd really like all of my team to just record their screen as they're working so that we can send it to AI to pull out the best knowledge every day, because how much lost knowledge, which, kind of goes back to Brandy, like, how much lost knowledge is there? But one of the hardest things about programming is, like, when you're in it, you're in the deep work, you've got all the information in your short-term memory. And, if you get distracted, then you got to rebuild your short-term memory. So, the hope is, like, man, can AI have a better understanding of what the whole project is, or this part of the project is, quicker without having to, quote unquote, get up to speed. Because that's one of the biggest bottlenecks that I've ran into is, like, I'm developing, but I've got other stuff that happens. Winchester was down here, and like, I get calls, and so the idea that I might be able to have some agents just work on it for a while, but and then my thought is, all right, cost. My thought is, if it's really, really functional and helpful, and it's between $400 and $1,000 a month, well, that's phenomenal. Like, that's great. And all of that.
So one thing that I've found that's potentially useful is, how, like, like we typically, in most scenarios, if you have the choice, like, I don't know, what's something in your life that you're wanting to accomplish, right? Like, like outside of business, just something, I don't know, repairs around the house, something personal. I don't know.
Me and the boys want to beat level 5 for every person on Brotato.
On Brotato, okay, level 5 for every person on Brotato. Okay, so
yeah.
For that task, you can imagine you might be able to hire somebody who was excellent at video games, has a really great system for how you think about video games, and like they've done that proven reliably, right? You have that person, and you compare that to the person who they have mastered getting past level 5 with every person on Bro Potato. They know nothing, or like they only know a modicum of information about video games in general, but they know Bro Potato and they know it well. Which person are you more likely to want to hire for that outcome? Right? The specialist, right? The Brotato. What I've learned when it comes to like everything that you just described or defined, the better that you could be in building these systems at saying, I want this outcome. So who is the agent that this is the only thing that they care about, and how can I define it that way? Right? Where and then how do I set up a system that gets that agent, that context, that they can produce the outcome that gets the thing that I want, and know that like what I've found is like you have, so if you imagine a team of special forces, right? So I like to think of agents as secret agents at this point. So you have a team of special forces, you will often have like they are all at least loosely aware of the overarching project goals, right? Yeah. And like they have a good understanding of that, but they're focused on their task, right? Their communications or their explosives or their whatever, right? They're focused on that part and how it fits into the whole. But there's somebody whose their job is to make sure that the team is doing what it's supposed to do. And they like, that's their exclusive goal. So you look for like a commander agent that its goal is to see, this was their goal, did they do it? And part of how they might decide did they do it is that they send it to another agent whose job is to assess the work of this agent based on criteria and things, right? And then they get back from that, and it's like, did that happen? No. Okay, then I send it back with this feedback and get it back until it's good. And then does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so as you're building something out, when you hear yourself say, I need this task to happen, I think what most people think of is what they like. The default is that they think, I need to get this agent to also do this. And that's often not the way that these AI agents seem to work well. They seem to work best when it's like, oh, you needed that step? Okay, now you need the, like, you instead of one person who knows how to write the test, run the test, assess the test results and all of that, it's like, no, I need a person who's really great at writing the tests. Then I need then I need the agent that assesses those tests or like runs those tests. And like, that's all that they do. They run the test. They get a test, they run it. That's their outcome, right? And they know they have the tools that they need to do that thing. And then you have the next agent. Yeah. The next agent's job is to actually assess the results of the test and provide feedback, right? And then then that loops through as it needs to until you get to the state where you got the result that you want to. Does that make sense? Just as you're going through and thinking about those tools?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I've been thinking of, in a way of, for me, I was thinking like, all right, I haven't even thought about like, oh man, can I have like a senior developer and a junior developer? And they like think through it themselves. And so like they're documenting to the junior developer. Because probably, one of the biggest, just like being able to see thinking mode has been huge.
Right.
Like to be able to have like real documentation from the AI agents, like really good documentation is huge. But the question is like, how deep do you want to break it out? Like, do we have like one specific Postgres database who's focused on, does he talk with someone that knows MeliSearch? Or is it one person that's an expert at Postgres plus MeliSearch? Kind of have them merge them together there symbiotically.
So have I heard you, or have I heard you? Have I told you the way some friends of ours described the way that boys' brains work? Have I told you this?
I think so, but I don't remember.
Okay, the basic idea is this, that when you got a group of boys, right, there is only ever one brain. And so if you have one boy, then that one boy has a full brain to work with. If you've got two boys together, they each have half a brain to work with.
Yeah.
If you have three, they got a third, fourth. And that's why very often the more boys you get together, the stupider the things that start happening are, because nobody's working with a full brain anymore. And so that's where you have people like, yeah, let's light this on fire, and accidentally burn down a village or whatever, right? Anyway,
right.
It's hyperbole, but that idea of why bad ideas might come out of groupthink and in amongst young boys. Anyway, that idea, I want that idea in your mind as you're thinking about what you give to an individual AI agent to do. And the more things you ask it to do, the worse it's going to do at each of them, right? And the less reliably it's going to be able to do any of them, right? Because the more complexity there is to the process, that's what starts to happen, is that you and it's not a clear exact line, but having an AI agent that does 10 things, like where the way that you code it out, the way that you describe what it does is it does 10 things, that AI agent is going to not be as good at those 10 things as a different AI agent who knows how to do 5. Does that make sense? And so figuring out the complexity, part of it to me is zeroing in on exactly what does this one really need to do versus what makes sense to just define this as a different task or outcome. And this is an area where like I think it starts to be helpful to think of them as AI agents and not humans. Where if you're working with a human, part of the way that we work is that we piece all this information together real well. We take in complexity and output and we do some subconscious processing to reason it out, right? AI isn't that way, where it's like the more you ask it to do, the more likely it's going to fail on some portion of that, right? And so that's at least what I've seen so far with our current models and the way they work right now, right? And so as you're building out agents, start with whatever flows naturally, right? Like start by trying to do whatever flows naturally. But what I think I'd want you to be looking at is, as you build something out and as you get a result back, if you're finding something isn't working right, that's a good trigger for you to ask yourself, am I asking too much of the individual agents? Can I break this one out into separate pieces and have a mini team work together? That might be part of what your process looks like. And then the other thing, like just as how you keep that system flowing well overall, I think your documentation portion is actually not just good for you, but also good for your agents. Where if you get the documentation done right, then you're kind of building that condensed knowledge of how these things work. How they work well. Like a good working framework of this might be, think about I wonder if we could do this in like a fractal way in order to like give a quantized way of doing this. If you know that any individual agent has this token capacity available to understand what it's doing and what it's accomplishing, what you probably want is that you can most likely assume that you want them to only ever have to rely on 20% of that to get done what they need to, right? So you want the code base that they're responsible for plus the documentation to only take up 20% of the portion of their task, right? So if you've got a really simple code base, that might be able to be like a small team, right? Where it's like this person does this task, and they all take in everything, but what they do with it is different, right? As your code base starts getting more complex, you might need to say, oh, like actually, I need to think about sort of breaking out these as like smaller applications that this team deals with this thing, this team deals with this thing, because they're not going to be able to keep this whole thing in mind. And you might be able to do that based on tokens, where depending on the model that you have, like, and 20% might be too high. I don't know what that number is, but like, does that make sense?
Yeah. So like with the 200 context window, we would want documentation to be 440. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Documentation and code base.
Right. So that
and why is that?
Well, if you think about the total context window, it's well, from what I've seen, it typically works this way. Like, that's like, you know how when you buy a car, how it tells you what the fuel efficiency is? But that fuel efficiency is based on like, this is the ideal scenario, the ideal outcomes, the ideal things, and at scale, which is never the real world, right? That's kind of what those token windows I found tend to be. It's like, this is the upward end of what's possible, not what your day-to-day use would look like reliably. Does that make sense? So more is often better, but it's not like you have that full context window available. And so like similarly, if you just run with the perspective of like, if there's this much power available and I can accomplish what I need to by only tapping into 20%, I'm more likely to be able to reliably do that than if I build things around tapping out the constraints every single time. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
And it's at least a good gut check to say, is this getting more complex than I could rely on these tools to even be able to comprehend?
Yeah, you don't want them to be at capacity.
Yeah, and that's at least a workable way.
A lot of capacity to think, not just full of memory.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, is there anything else in your world that you could think of where like you found a way to think about those ratios? Because 20% for me is mostly just the 80-20 rule. Like if I'm going to start with a number, it's that, right?
Yeah.
But there might be something else that you have like as a, you know, what's the way to think about this ratio of short-term versus long-term memory, essentially.
I mean, the only other way I think about, like what I think about is the 10,000 hour rule. Like once you've got it so integrated that you don't have to think about it, and so you can, you know, think about new stuff.
Right. Yeah, when it comes to AI though, like AI is like, it's different because it doesn't learn, right? Like it AI is weird.
It learns by you giving it context, right?
So It's a little bit different. So AI front loads its learning, right? So its learning is the training.
Yeah.
And then what it's able to do is it's able to take on and pull off perspective, like changing clothes for us, right? And that's what the context is. So it's able it's able to do a much better job at like wiping the slate clean and just paying attention to the context that it has in front of it. And that, like, that's part of the superpower of it, right? Where like,
right,
you could get it to completely rethink about the world with different context. Yeah, so it's different. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I think that concept I think could be useful. I think I would see what it feels like if you start with that like 20% of the token window max as being like what you're expecting, and like again 20% might be high, because if you're doing a long conversation thread, that thread will peak out on its total token capacity potentially somewhat quickly, because part of how those tools tend to work is it's re-putting in the entire code base each time, right? And so it's like you have it multiple times. Yeah, anyway, so like it might even be smaller in terms of what you want your code base to be as a percentage of what it's working on. But I like that idea. Like if you think about that flow of like short-term versus long-term memory, where like if you could if you could define that chain well, where you think through like what's our process where I have a system that we work on coding something, we get it tested to the point of validation, and that it's working, it's not breaking other features, right? So like there's first, does it work? Then when implemented, does it break anything else? If that looks good, then it gets added to the documentation as like, here's how this system works and how we thought about it. And then moving forward, that documentation kind of distills all of the work that was necessary to get to that point. It doesn't distill all the work. It distills the outcome of it, right? Does that make sense? And then moving forward, then as like that documentation starts to be where it's like at that point, you would very readily be able to start like a new thread or a new feature or a new process. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because
it actually reminds me a lot of kind of like what I've studied with Jamie and like psychology and NLP and like basically how do we chunk stuff, right. Like I say the word brownie and that's one word, but it's got all this connotation for you,
right.
Or because that's basically what we do. We compress data into
right.
one word or one token, we kind of play with that
right.
minimization. Like, how do you decide where to pull in different chunks? How do you go
right.
through that? That's kind of what it makes me think of.
Yeah. And I think like part of the way that you could have the system where it can build on itself to accomplish what you're looking for is that you get like, after you have a successful round of we've got this aspect of this feature working, there's a documentation portion that's added. And maybe even part of the documentation includes like, this is what it is, what we're using, how it works, what the expected outcome is. And then like it might even in the documentation, you leave placeholders for like, these are the features that we're leading toward, that we want to achieve with this, where it's like the first step of the process might be we need to successfully pull from the API to get this data back. The ultimate goal is to get here, but like, you might have your round of like where it gets added back into the knowledge base before you start a new thread. Of being, do we have our system for pulling the API information? Like, do we know where we're storing the keys? Do we know like I you get what I'm saying? Where it's like that, like that's the first chain of the process, and you don't necessarily want to think through all that, but you want it to be like you sort of know, did we get this part captured, and then you know that the system knows to like go in and improve the documentation after each successful iteration of that, right? Like maybe part of it is in a conversation with you, it knows to check in and say, hey, did we get the outcome that we were looking for? And this is the outcome that we were looking for. And then you're like, yes. That yes is okay, great. Now it gets documented. This is what the process
now
looks
you
like.
add that to the documentation. Yeah. That makes sense.
And it's like, if no, then it knows that you're going to keep iterating until you get to the outcome that you're looking for. And then you start building the documentation like piece by piece. And you might even, like, one of the things that I found useful is like having maps that expand it out a bit and compress it too. So you have like the high level overview, and then potentially for each of those, like a deeper breakdown of exactly what it is, where it's like your high level map might just say, you know, run API or like pull API to get back this set of information. But then like there's a deeper documentation step that's like, you know, it's running this way, codes are stored here, this is a breakdown of what all the information that we get back looks like, and it's like it doesn't need all of that context all the time, but you sort of equip it with the ability to drill in and get those extra details as it needs to. So it might be like a dual documentation step of here's like the outline map versus here's the details of each step.
Makes sense.
But yeah. Anyway, those are sort of my preliminary thoughts on this. I think in terms of for you, next steps, we get AutoGen installed. We set the idea of what you're looking to do. You start coding it, right? And you start down that path. And again, like I don't know, part of my process for this, me thinking through all this. Once you get in and you start doing it, it's like I do this work up front of sort of defining some of the milestones and goalposts along the way, so that because if I don't, then I get into the midst of the stuff and I just get into the flow and get into it, and it's just as easy for me to spend multiple hours not actually accomplishing what I'm looking for or not seeing what I needed to see as it is to get a ton done in that amount of time. And defining some of those outcomes in advance, it's like, have you learned much about like lucid dreaming?
No.
So one of the things that they teach you for if you want to start lucid dreaming, you do things during your day-to-day life that would be a thing that helps you have lucid dreams. So like as a for instance, in a dream, typically text doesn't actually render right? So when you're trying to read something, the text isn't actually real. It's not real text. It's garbled. It doesn't make sense. And so one of the things that you could do to trigger yourself to become conscious during a dream is you mentally in your day-to-day life, when you see text, you say, I see text. Can I read it? Yes, I could read it, and I could read it clearly. I'm not dreaming.
Gotcha.
Right? And so then when you're in a dream state, you've programmed yourself that when you see text, you try to read it, and then you then might become conscious of, I'm in a dream. This text is shifting and changing in front of my eyes. This is a dream. right? Anyway,
Yeah.
this process, and there's other things that are like that too, but this process is kind of that for me, where it's like, I'll get into the flow of work. If I haven't defined some of these milestones, then I don't know if I'm actually achieving what I want to. I'll just be in the dream. I'll be in that state of doing something and not be able to see, am I accomplishing what I'm looking for? I don't know. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I mean, I think this is, again, a really good example. Like, I would never do this on my own. And, you know, there's part of it that's even painful for me. And this is how, I mean, you explained it well. We don't get in the middle of it and we're lost and just going around in circles.
Right.
Which is something that can happen to me a lot.
Right.
Or it's just bogged down because people that are working on it, they got questions. And I was like, I don't know. I haven't thought that far. I've got to jump through. So the fact that you kind of drag me to the end is how it actually gets completed well once.
Right.
And like, I don't like it. It's not enjoyable, but the results are. And it's not that painful compared to walking around in circles like the Israelites for 40 years in the desert. I mean, that's a really good example of what you solve. You know, like, how many times are people just walking around in circles when, you know, they could go from A to C really well if they just spend a little time up front figuring out what it was, versus just you get in the middle and now you're lost.
Right. And so, yeah, so for you, for the next time, this to me is the clarity that I have, at least, where I think we can meaningfully move forward on this project for you. So first off, the defined outcome, that one of the things that we want to pay attention to is we want to see how long did it used to take me to accomplish something. And the way that we make those numbers, comparing apples to apples, is we say we got to have some idea of what the complexity was compared to the time that it took, right? So yeah, and these could be rough numbers. It doesn't need to be like an exact thing, but that's the trajectory of what we're paying attention to, right? So time to accomplish compared to complexity, and we use that to equalize the numbers to get a comparable rate.
Well, what's cool, I've got GitHub, and we've got code that has been submitted, so we can actually like upload the commit log to AI and get them to kind of create a table for us.
Yeah. And so that way you have a way to do a post assessment. The key data that you need is how long did it take to get that commit done, right? So you need that as part of what you're tracking. You need to be tracking how long did the commit take, and then potentially what tool or process was used that you're like wanting the comparison on, right? So so you need that information in order to be able to assess it. So there's that. And then the other thing is, going into this process, part of what I was hopefully trying to share is, as you start working with agents, some of the things to look for to know how to fine tune your system, right? So preemptively thinking through, like, I don't want to just keep running into the wall of token limits. So how can I be smart about knowing when I might be running into that wall? And being able to have a way to say, is this the problem that I'm running into, rather than the tool or something else, right? So there's that. There's also the preemptive, like, okay, if we're going to be building out agents, here's some of the way that I think about building out agents that might be a helpful way for you preemptively going into it. So that instead of making the first mistake of saying, I'm going to do one agent that's going to do all these things, that you sort of preemptively understand, I might need multiple agents that are doing subsets of this. So when you start mentally building your solutions, you're preemptively saying, well, what is the task that this one needs to do? Or what are the 2 to 3 tasks, rather than thinking that the solution is, I'm going to build the perfect agent that does 100 tasks. Probably not going to
Right.
do that well, right? The agentic system, like that overall team of agents working together, that could accomplish the 100 tasks, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so, like, if you're how you think about building out these systems is more like you know how our body is actually like a number of separate systems running together, right? Like there's our cells that literally have mini factories in them with mitochondria and stuff like that, like just making the cell itself work. And then even our digestive system, like we have a bunch of bacteria that influence like how we digest things and what we crave and stuff like that, right? And all of that,
right?
It's like, that's just two examples, but like there's a bunch of stuff like that ultimately adds up to like who we are as a person, right? And influences how we see things. That ends up being part of the ecosystem for building out an agentic system, is that understanding of saying like, oh, right, like I potentially need an agent that works at like a mitochondrial level. Does that make sense? And not always, but like at least getting your brain more in that vein, I think sets you up for success of what's realistic to achieve.
I bet we can even ask AI to help us think through that.
Right.
Yeah.
But
you know, I love that idea. I think that's the reason I was kind of asking you about, had you seen that documentary about Cindy Margulis and symbiosis? Super boring, but that's what I think. That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, I think you nailed it.
But yeah, I'd say. So next steps for you on the AutoGen stuff would be, getting it installed and set up is going to be the first part, if you haven't already done that. That's my next step. Defining what your first test project is, and in the sense of like, what is the outcome that you're wanting? What is the feature, or what is the program that you're wanting to create, right? Ideally, it's something, I don't know, there really isn't an ideal for that, honestly. But like, to me, if you could wave a magic wand and have it be the perfect outcome, you'd be building something that actually moves you forward in your business, right? So you're building something that you actually need, a feature that really is needed in your business. I love to do that sort of thing, where it's like, if I do this work and accomplish it, I move forward more than just the knowledge.
But
yeah,
and I mean, it'd probably be, the first thing would be like, can it probably be something like the dashboard, that using like connecting with our no-code DB, you having the dashboard kind of connect with that, because that's kind of the next thing that doesn't take a whole lot of work.
Right. That makes sense. So yeah, and then like a dashboard you ultimately need to define through what needs to be on the dashboard. What's your vision for that? How do those things connect up? You know that you want to be able to pull information from the database and render it on the dashboard. You need to have a vision for that. Yeah, none of this needs to be defined in advance. Those are going to be those steps for that. So that makes sense. And so you'll know you'll know that project is completed when you have a shippable dashboard, right?
Right. Yeah.
What for you, are there any other constraints that are required in that dashboard? Like what are the tools? What are the code base? The code base isn't the right word for this. Like what system is it integrating in with? You build off of Laravel and whatnot. What other?
Yeah, it's gonna be Laravel, PHP. Eventually, and so I've actually got all written out.
Okay.
With with AI. But yeah, Laravel PHP is going to go on my Linux server. Um,
Laravel, PHP, Linux server.
yeah.
Are there any other tools or things that you know that it needs to work with, or ideas that you have to steer the direction?
No, I think that's mainly it. I've got a design, so I don't want it to have yeah. So I mean, it's going to use Tailwind on the front end, maybe Prime View, that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so Tailwind is
Yeah.
a CSS framework. What's Prime View?
Yeah. It is it ties in with Tailwind, and it creates React type front end components interaction. It's not React, it's Vue, VUE, but it's that same kind of idea.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep, that makes sense. Why did you? I'm just curious for my own reasons. Why did you decide on Vue versus React?
I hate React.
Fair enough.
It's so similar to the reason I use Laravel versus Symfony. Symfony is great, like enterprise, super big, super heavy, super complex. Laravel is lighter, simpler. Vue is a similar thing. I like stuff to be light and fast and easy, and from my experience, kind of like, I mean that's that's what I do. I try to move fast, light, simple.
In what ways is it fast, light, and simple? Like, what's an example of where that shows up?
Vue just has like it was built after React to do the same things that React does, but light and simple.
Gotcha.
Like literally, like that's what it was based with.
But like in what way is it light or simple? Is it how you define it in the CSS, or is it how you, or is it in the simplicity of the code base, or what does that look like?
Yeah, simplicity of the code base, and so it's less code, runs faster. That there's another one that's even made to be simpler than that called Svelte, but I really like a good mix of. It's been around for a while. It's not brand new. I hate cutting edge. Right. Personally, I don't even like. I wish that I wouldn't even use a front end framework like that because I'm old school and I don't like having to build. But that's it. It does end up giving a lot of good features, and it's pretty common. And if it wasn't for AI, I would not do it. But AI lets it actually happen.
Have you ever looked at Bulma? Is Bulma in the same view or the same same world?
I think does Bulma use Tailwind?
Let's see.
I don't think so. I think Bulma is its own like CSS framework, and it will work with it. It will work. It's more like a bootstrap, so it'll work with React or Vue or Svelte.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
so yeah.
And so Vue also the stack that we're using, the developer that I've been working with, that was his recommendation, and he's got a really good eye for design, and I'm already I really like Vue. Vue's pretty popular in the Laravel world, and so it works really it kind of goes together.
That makes sense. And all of this is just I'm curious because these are things I'm very loosely familiar with all of them, and I don't know why people choose between one or the other, but buddy of mine also used Vue instead of React as well, and I forget what all his reasons were. Anyway, interesting. So next steps, get what am I forgetting? What's the system
Get
called
it
again?
installed. AutoGen, right?
AutoGen. Yeah, there we go. Get AutoGen installed. We want to build out your dashboard. We need it to fit those the constraints of those systems. And you want it to be able to work with DocoDB. You want it to be able to work on your Linux server. You want it to use Vue, Prime Vue specifically. You want to PHP and Laravel and Prime Vue, and Vue and Prime Vue are kind of our stack there, right?
Yeah.
And you already have the design, so your goal is to make that design a reality using those systems.
Right.
And you'll know it's ready when you can ship and have that dashboard to be able to show clients. And are we there in terms of the data that you need is already in in DocoDB? So like you already have the data, we just need to display it.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, perfect. I was just double checking to make sure. That's one of the other potential hurdles. If like we know that we want to end up there, but we don't have the data to base it off of, then we also need, well, what are we doing to get the data? Okay, cool. I think that feels like a really clear, tangible test project that we could deploy on this that I understand. That makes sense. That sounds like the next step there.
I like it.
And then our working assessment model right now is going to be based off of the commits in GitHub. How can you track the time that something took? And where do you want to where makes sense to track it? Does it make sense to include it in the commit?
So I think going forward, I guess, like I'm not thinking of it hours as mainly more like days. Like, I mean, with a regular developer, we're looking at days or weeks before features are done. So, right. I mean, if we get a feature done in, similar thing, like a couple days, then we know it's working.
That makes sense. That makes
sense.
It might make sense that because you'll have the days by default just from the commits, right? Because you can see the number of days that it took for that. It might still make sense if you can to track the hours, because the hours will ultimately add up to the days. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. And it's both. It's It makes me think of the how to describe that. Makes me think of the iron triangle. If you could have time, quality, or cost, pick two. That idea.
Right.
It makes me think of kind of that nuance of if you can dial in the time in terms of hours and decrease that, you likely see an improvement in the number of days, even if it's not a 1-for-1. Does that make sense? And
right. Yeah.
And over time, you might find that that hour to complexity ratio shows up on the day rate more reliably. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, I like that idea of actually keeping it. Yeah, I mean, if possible, if we can show, both the tokens and the time, that would help us
have some data around it.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense. Yeah, I'll work on installing AutoGen so it's ready.
That makes sense, and it that's a good thing to note in the back of your mind, that being able to track the total tokens it took to accomplish something might be a thing to note as well.
Right.
That's another thing that we could optimize for in the long run. It doesn't matter as much. It's a lower priority, but if you long term you're optimizing and you have one thing that takes a ton of tokens and is expensive, and another thing that takes less of tokens and is less expensive but gets the same outcome for the same time, that's a good tertiary goal. Anyway.
Yeah, you know, and I mean my goal is, my constraint is I want it to be 400 or between 400 and $1,000 a month or less. So, like,
in terms of cost for the
token cost.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What AI models have you been using for this so far?
So my plan is to use 3.7.
Hello.
My goal is to use 3.7. That's what the training that I've been working with Cursor. That's what it's been recommending.
Right.
One of my thoughts was, like I host referrals while you sleep email right now. I've thought about moving over to Google Business so we can have Notebook LM Advanced, because it's got such a huge context window for some stuff.
Right.
And I've used Grok for hey, please don't do that. I've used Grok to help analyze the code base and idea because of its huge context windows.
Right.
But the plan is to use 3.7 right now.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Might see, does the API have the thinking mode on the 3.7 right now?
I think it does.
Yeah. Okay. That helps. If you wanted to, do you have a open router set up?
I don't.
So open router might be useful as well, and you might play with R1 for this as well. Mainly for sake of just thinking through this. What was your cost that you're looking at again? It was 400 to 1,000.
400 to 1,000.
It's possible part of how we'll be able to like that's something to note while we're doing this is report back what your API usage costs are looking like to see are we trending toward this is going to end up costing too much over the course of a month or not.
Right.
Because that might be where it's like, okay, well let's look at using R1 instead, because that's going to be in many cases 1/100th or sometimes 1/1000th the cost, and even if it's not quite as good, if you can give it more iterations and less cost, it might be able to solve some of its own problems, if that makes sense.
I did check. You can use 3.7 with extended thinking on the API. So.
Perfect. Open router is really simple to set up. That's another thing that you might look at doing. What it does is it gives you an API or an API that you can access and like a API key. And when you're using it, you just define the model that you're using, and so it could you could switch between from open router. You could have the one API key and switch between OpenAI and Claude and R1 and any model that comes out. So it gives you less things to have to update, but still being able to use it.
I wouldn't be shocked if AutoGen actually already uses it, but maybe not.
Yeah, it might. But yeah, all right, cool. That all makes sense to me.
Awesome.
Do you feel like do you feel like I at least understand what you're looking to do and what the steps of success look like? Because really, honestly, that's most of what we accomplished. I don't know if I did anything in terms of you having any new information or anything. Maybe a couple of things, but most of this was mostly like, if you're going to be deploying on this, how would I think about it in order to know how to come alongside you, if that makes sense.
Right. It was good helping me think through this stuff. Like I said, we got through it, and it was good. Like that's the That's how you get to completeness, right? Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be fun to see how this plays out.
Awesome. Well, cool. So yeah, that's our next step, and hopefully, if you had to guess, how long would it typically take you to get a dashboard like this done?
I mean, truthfully, like, I wouldn't be able to do it with my current workload, like, honestly.
Right.
But so I would have to put a job ad, hire a developer, test a bunch, bring one in. I mean, probably a month, from here. I've got a developer that can do it part-time, maybe, so, maybe 2 weeks with my current person. Once I had someone up and going, probably a week or two, because it just takes a while to, it takes 90% of the time to do the first 90%, and it takes 90% of the time to do the last 10%. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say 2 to 4 weeks.
2 to 4 weeks typically.
Yeah.
Because mentally, I had it in my mind that we might be able to accomplish this, and this may not be realistic, but we might be able to get this done by the end of the week.
I think it's possible we might be able to do that with this. That's the hope with AutoGen, right?
Right.
That'd be a huge win.
Yeah. And honestly, I wonder, like,
so we can build out Brandy.
Yeah, indeed. Sweet. All right. Well, there we go. We got some shipped done. Mostly this was a strategy session. I accomplished a couple of things that I needed to, and we dove into what was required on this. But it's one of those things. I mean, honestly, thank you for continually saying it was painful, but I needed it. Because I go through this process and I feel the same way. I'm like, I don't know, is this a big waste of time? I don't know. Am I doing anything valuable here? Because I don't know how to exist without doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's part of the mix of how I get to the end result that I do. But it's not something that I look at and I'm confident in of I don't know, here's exactly where and how this is helping you. Part of it's all I know is that I don't know how to think about your problem until we talk through it like this.
Right.
And anyway, so yeah, that's part of it for me. But
I like it. All right. Well, I'm gonna go get something to eat.
Yeah, enjoy. All right. Well, here we go. We got some ship done.
Adios.